In Queensland, state parliament has risen for the year and for some MPs, perhaps forever. The House is scheduled to return on Valentine's Day next year. But with the election due around March, there's at least a 50-50 chance that this parliament won't be returning. So have we seen the last of Anna Bligh and her team on the government benches? I spoke earlier to political reporter Chris O'Brien at Parliament House. Chris, I see evidence of the Christmas spirit there behind you, but according to the polls, the year hasn't been so merry for Labor. I wonder if this week was the parliamentary swan song for the Bligh government.
Yes, Jess, the House has risen for the year, and as you say, we have seen the schedule for next year. We're due back on the 14th of February, but that is perilously close to election time. Now, it's not out of the question that the House could resume for a few sitting weeks before the election, but once January rolls around, we'll all be keeping a very close eye on the gates of Government House in case the Premier stops by to set a date.
Or she might do it on Twitter.
Well, she did use YouTube last time.
Well, whether or not this has been the last parliamentary hurrah for the current government, it's been an extraordinary year.
With some extraordinary events right up until the very end. You're referring, of course, to the fact that for most of the year, the LNP has been led by somebody outside the Parliament. Campbell Newman taking over from John Paul Langbroek, with Jeff Seeney, the parliamentary leader. Unprecedented.
Has it worked?
Well, Jess, according to those polls you talked about, yes. For most of the time, Campbell Newman has maintained a clear lead. But that's not to say there haven't been some hiccups here inside the House.
Yes, a bizarre episode this week showed that things can still go wrong, even for a high-flying opposition.
Mr Speaker, what we saw in this House yesterday was a sequence of events that can only be described as extraordinary. It has left many not only red-faced but scratching their heads about how an entire opposition could be absent from a parliamentary session.
What a way to finish the year. A monumental blunder there by the opposition whips to leave the House completely unattended by any member of the LNP. It was carelessness, it wasn't arrogance, but unfortunately for Campbell Newman, it fed the government's line that the LNP is just sitting back with its feet up, waiting for an inevitable election win.
In the face of this embarrassing performance, Mr Newman sought to make light of it. He laughed at the possibility that his 31 members of Parliament were all taking an early lunch in the cafeteria. Even more astonishingly, Mr Newman claimed that whether or not his members turned up for a vote was, and I quote, immaterial.
Mr Newman later described his MP's absence as unacceptable, and privately most of the opposition are shaking their heads at their own goal. But in public, the parliamentary leader was defiant.
What the government have done today, and everyone needs to know, is to be deliberately dishonest about the agenda for debate here in the Parliament.
Jess, that excuse doesn't completely hold water because no matter what the agenda was, somebody from the LNP should have been in the House.
The other big event this week was the passing of Andrew Fraser's private members' bill to legally recognise civil partnerships. Non-government MPs voted no. They didn't think it should have been debated this week.
This is not an emergent issue. It is divisive, it is emotive, and the proposal in the standing orders for adequate time to be allowed for consultation is important.
This bill was a stunt from day one. This bill was a distraction from day one. It has been engineered through this House to the benefit. It has been engineered through this House to the personal benefit of the Deputy Premier because he sees some political benefit in it for him.
To say that this is a distraction, Mr Speaker, is an outrage against those people for whom they see this as an important issue. For a long time, people have desired to see the change that this bill proposes, Mr Speaker, and to deny that, to seek refuge in a concept of erecting some refuge of process, I think, Mr Speaker, is to deny with courage the true opposition that people have.
Ayes 47, noes 40. The question is carried in the affirmative.
The Speaker, John McKell, there announcing the result. And if this does turn out to have been the last sitting week of Parliament, then it's also been the end for John McKell. Mr Speaker, do you think you have vacated the chair for the last time?
The Premier's indicated that the Parliament will sit next year. I have to be guided by that.
This year's extraordinary LNP leadership structure, leaving the politics aside, has it worked from a parliamentary point of view?
Oh, there's been no issues with having an opposition leader whom I recognise. No issues at all. It's the first time in history, however, that we've had an opposition leader who hasn't been an elected member of the parliament. But the parliament's coped with that situation.
You haven't been happy this year about the new oversight structure here at Parliament. As the year draws to a close, do you still think it's been a retrograde step?
I've made my position pretty clear on the speakership. I don't resolve from that. Let's talk about the positive. The committee system has been first class. It's given members an opportunity to get to know legislation, understand it in a way that they never had previously. That's been a great thing.
In your valedictory speech, you said MPs should be proud of what they've achieved here. What did you mean by that?
I think they've canvassed the whole range of views that have been out there for Queensland. What we've seen is the issues of Queensland discussed in the Parliament, the tragedies at the start of the year, so we saw tears. We've seen heated debate, but not heated to the point where the Parliament couldn't continue. I think there's been a clash of ideas. That's what Parliament's about.
Mr McKell, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jess, if this has been the end of the Parliament for this particular term, that's the last time we'll see Mr McKell here, and 8 other MPs at least, for that matter. But 7:30 Queensland will be back next year to cover what will be a fascinating parliamentary year in 2012.
See you then, Chris. And in the meantime, the Premier is giving nothing away.
Mr Speaker, the next scheduled sitting of this Parliament is February the 14th, which of course is Valentine's Day, and I can't imagine a better way. I can't imagine a better way to spend Valentine's, Mr Speaker, than here with the member for Callide and all of his colleagues. Again, if they can show up.